Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Lord, praise you, Lord.
In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out. And there, ahead of them, went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Janet Wolfe, who served as a pastor of a Methodist congregation in the inner city, tells a story about Joseph. She says he was one of those children who could completely disrupt a class in 3 seconds flat. No matter how well prepared the teacher, Joseph could turn things upside down in a heartbeat. And on this particular day, Joseph was being especially challenging. She said, "We were trying to get ready for the Christmas play, but Joseph kept muttering, 'Ain't coming to no Christmas play. I got better things to do. Wouldn't come if you gave me the best part. Ha!' Well, Janet said they considered just leaving him out altogether. But in the end, she asked him to work with her. They would sit up front and help the children to remember when to come and go. If the angels stayed a bit too long, they would prompt them to return to their seats. It's a really important part, Joseph. In fact, they can't do the play without us. So I hope you're going to be here." "Told you, I ain't got no time for no stupid play. My mama's taking me to the Christmas parade, and I'll be partying while y'all are in here fooling around." Well, Joseph's mother worked 2 jobs, and it was not likely she would take him to the Christmas parade. Even so, Janet and her crew didn't expect to see Joseph that Sunday afternoon. But when she drove into the parking lot 45 minutes early, there he was, all dressed up, sitting on the steps waiting. One of the neighbors told her later that he'd been there for 30 minutes, just waiting. And he greeted her with a smile and a hug, and he was incredibly helpful. Joseph was willing to do whatever was asked of him and more. Janet wondered if this was the same child. It was almost time for the play to start. Joseph was helping to get the younger children ready. One of the older boys came into the room, took one look at Joseph, and hollered, "Ha! Thought you weren't coming to no stupid play. Thought you had better things to do." Well, Janet figured This was the end of the angelic behavior and waited for the explosion. Joseph turned and looked at the older boy and then turned back to his work, declaring, well, that was before I was in the story, stupid. See, now I'm in the story. They can't do it without me. Now I'm in the story. Of course I'm going to be here. What might it find for us to all find our place in the story, to discover how we belong, and to discern anew what God is up to in our story? I'm struck by the unlikely cast of characters that Matthew assembles in his Christmas story that we've just heard on the 12th day of Christmas as we celebrate Epiphany. We have King Herod, a ruthless ruler who, upon hearing of another king being born, and then later realizing that he'd been tricked by those wise men, the Magi, he's filled with such fear of a potential rival that he orders the execution of all children 2 years old or younger in and around Bethlehem. And then we have a group of Magi following a star to find this newborn King of the Jews. And they're the ones that I'm especially drawn to today. I'm awed by their spiritual intuition that God was up to something so special that they would set out on a pilgrimage from afar to see it for themselves. We don't know how many Magi there were, though tradition is often on the three from the number of gifts that they bring. They've even developed names that I pronounced at the beginning of our service as we chalked the door of our house of worship for this year: Casper, Melchior, Balthazar. And their appearance in the story connects with our first lesson from Isaiah. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord. The Magi's inclusion in this story opens it up for all people to be included, not just those who are particularly Christian. In Matthew's gospel, this is the first story following Jesus' birth. And there are also connections here to what happens at the end of Matthew's gospel. The Magi are looking for the one born King of the Jews. And the inscription that was hung over Jesus on the cross said what? This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Jesus' birth and death are woven together. And following his resurrection, Jesus sends his disciples forth to bear his light of mercy and love to all nations, with the promise to be with them always. The Magi come from afar, and the disciples are sent afar to spread the good news to all. So where are you in this story? If you came here to worship today, then you're like one of the Magi, paying homage and offering your gifts. And perhaps you might see yourself on a spiritual pilgrimage, seeking to discern the Spirit's movement in your life. If that's the case, then one lesson from these Magi is to pay attention to your dreams, for they provide prompts and hints to illuminate how we might best live out God's ways of love and justice. The Magi paid attention to their dreams and thus didn't report back to King Herod as requested, but headed for home on a different road. Mary's husband, Joseph, also paid attention to his dreams, which got his family away from Herod's murderous rage through a sojourn in Egypt. And I had a dream this week that I'm still wondering about. We have this built-in bookshelf in our house, and I dreamt that former owners had left some books up on the top shelf, which I know they hadn't, but my dream didn't know that. I climbed up the bookshelf and grabbed a book, and upon opening it, I discovered it was a devotional book of some sort and seemed to contain just a whole multitude of spiritual insights. And that was all I got. And as I woke up and was pondering about that, I wondered if it was in any way connected to an insightful quote that I had been pondering earlier in the week from Buddhist nun Pema Chodron. And it's a quote that just somehow just really resonated with me. Here it is. One of the deepest habitual patterns that we have is the feeling that the present moment is not good enough. And I wonder if my dream was prompting me in some way to be more fully present to each and every moment, more fully in the now. Or maybe it was a prompt to spend more dedicated time in devotional practices. Or perhaps to develop more spiritual acuity. Dreams are messages to us from our unconscious being. And even if we don't have clear understanding of what a dream is trying to tell us, like I didn't really have that in this one, I think this dream will keep my spirit more open to insights about how God is moving in my life and in my world. It will help me to be more like one of those spiritually sensitive magi, so tuned in to the new thing God was doing in their day that they set off on a new journey. And I also want to highlight that the magi came and left together as a group. This wasn't an individual quest, but a communal one. I wonder how they assembled for this journey. Did one of them have the vision and then began inviting others to join them? It'll be 10 years this coming next fall that Susan and I together walked the Camino, a pilgrimage trail across the north of Spain. I still fondly remember the strong sense of community that quickly formed among strangers that we met along the way. And Matthew tells us that the Magi altogether were overwhelmed with joy in finding what they were looking for. So keep in mind that none of us is on this pilgrim journey alone. It's imperative that we share our collective wisdom in discerning where and how God's light is illuminating the darkness of our lives and our world. And maybe this is where we can find ourselves in the story. The world in many ways is like the one that Jesus was born into, with power-hungry tyrants and empires built on the backs of the downtrodden and the depletion of this planet's life-giving resources. Our fantastic advances in technology are both a blessing and a curse. We have so much collective know-how in the palms of our hands, but can be so distracted by information overload that we lack in our abilities to discern what God is up to in each and every present moment. Together, we can join on a pilgrimage like those magi did in Jesus' day, assisting each other to hold on to hope and to remain focused on how God is being born anew in our world and in our lives. Through baptismal waters, we too are like little Joseph in that story I began with. This Epiphany season, I invite you to consider how you play your part in God's story. Let's watch together for the morning light arising in our midst. Let's imagine new and creative ways to let the glory of the Lord illuminate our lives and our world. And together, like those magi, let's fully savor the joy. Amen.